My name is Brian Day. Thank you for being here bright-eyed and bushy-tailed this morning. Everybody's here to talk about Exchange Hybrid. Yes? No? This is your opportunity to run out. I won't be offended. I work in Office 365. I'm on what we call the Enterprise Cloud Complex Organizations team. So it's a big, long title that essentially means we're the team that is responsible for shipping our on-premises releases of Exchange Server. We're also involved in Exchange Online Multi-Geo, which we'll be talking about in our data centers and multi-geo session coming after this in the Emerald Room, as well as looking at the mergers, acquisitions, divestiture, business-to-business space. So if you've got, well, we won't be talking about all of those topics during this talk. I welcome you to come down to the experts booth down in the hub. I believe I'm going to be there from 2 to 3:30 this afternoon. So if there's any of those topics you heard me say there, they're like, oh, I've got some interest or some questions, come find me there. Otherwise, we'll get into talking about Exchange Hybrid. So over the next hour or so, we're going to talk to you guys kind of some of the areas that we've been investing in, hopefully to make Hybrid easier for you to set up and use, as well as help make things easier for you to get to Exchange Online. We know Hybrid's been a bit of a challenge over the last decade or so with Exchange 2010. And kind of like, I like to do the poll the audience thing here, just to see who's awake at this time of day. So who's already using Exchange Online in a hybrid configuration today? Awesome. Every time more and more hands are going up. Anybody already on Exchange 2019? Nice, good, few of you. 2016? Nice, excellent. 13? We're gonna keep going. Who wants to admit 2010? All right. Look to your left, look to your right. There's probably some very bright consultants in the room that know the end of support date is coming in January 2020, and they'll be more than happy to help you get off of Exchange 2010. Anybody got 2007 boxes running around? Yeah? Get out. They're still out there. They're still, I mean, I think it's a testament to how well the software actually was by the time we got it to, Service Pack 3 update, roll up 4000. But, they're still kicking out there. We still see some Exchange 2003 too. And I love on-premises releases. That's where I kind of grew up in my career in Exchange and whatnot. And it's always fun to work with them and see everybody that's pushing them to their limits still today. So we've done a lot of kind of, as you see here, we call it re-engineering our engineering, where back in like the Exchange 2013 time, we'd actually, we were running Exchange Online essentially on what was a slightly enhanced version of Exchange on-premises. And when we would cut the builds for on-premises, it was actually coming right from the Exchange Online code. And I kind of show you an example here of what we've gone and done now when it came to Exchange 2019. So the way it used to work was we had Exchange Online running, and that was, and just so you're aware, a lot of times we get asked, is Exchange Online running Exchange 2019 already? Is it running Exchange 2016 already, back when 2016 was new? Exchange Online is not running any version of Exchange. Right? That's more of an on-premises terminology. We just call Exchange Online Exchange Greenfield. It's just whatever the latest version, latest build of Exchange is, we're constantly compiling it and deploying it. We're in a constant state of deployment of new bits every single day in Exchange Online. So it's just always far ahead of anything that's already being shipped on-prem, and that was also true for 2016 and 2013. So what we would do is every day there's hundreds and hundreds of changes that are going into Exchange Online. Everything from language localization to new features to just something that might be a simple update to make a new button show up in OA. It's constant. There's so many different teams that are making changes every single day. And what we used to do was we would kind of, every few months, we would draw the line and say, okay, well, here, today's Exchange Online build is now going to be Exchange 2016. And then a few months later, all right, that's cumulative update 1 for 2016. And a few months later, that's cumulative update 2 for 2016. So there was a lot of churn inside each of those builds. And when we would go and give you those cumulative updates, there was a lot of stuff happening inside of those. That didn't necessarily mean you got everything that was in Exchange Online. As I'm sure you're all well aware, every feature that is in Exchange Online isn't necessarily in Exchange on-premises. It's just almost impossible for us to package up some of these things due to their dependencies inside of 365 and ship them into a nice on-prem build. So our customers kind of said, we liked it, but it's a little too much. There's a lot changing. It's making it hard for us to kind of test this and get it out every few months, especially when you're in hybrid. What do we support in a hybrid relation? The current or the current -1 version of Exchange, right? The cumulative update. And we're telling folks that you have to stay current on your cumulative updates in order to be in what we consider a supported hybrid environment. And that gets really challenging, especially when you got a lot of third-party products running inside your environment. And if they have not yet said that, hey, this latest cumulative update that just came out 4 months ago is okay, it makes it difficult for you to then update to that. So they kind of said, can we slow down a little bit? And we said, okay, we can do that. So what we've gone and done is, we build this animation out. We did a branch, right? So we forked off Exchange on-premises. So now Exchange Online and Exchange on-premises are being built in 2 different trees. And we broke off the 2019 RTM. And now what's happening is we're taking very specific curated fixes from Exchange Online or specific fixes for Exchange on-premises. And those are the only changes now that are going into the cumulative updates for Exchange 2019. So when you get, we just released cumulative update 1, you're getting a much smaller delta of changes now that's making it much easier for you to kind of throw that build into your test environment, go through, make sure everything's okay, and get it out into your production environment. And what we're seeing is customers are essentially asking us, they're saying, hey, I'm staying on premises, I've decided that at least for now, I'm not going to move to Exchange Online, or maybe I'm only going to move a subset of my users to Exchange Online, not everybody, but we want a really rock solid, predictable version of Exchange for on-prem. And this is so far what we've found to be the kind of the middle ground where we can keep shipping an on-premises product but keep it stable for you while we are putting all of our investment into new technology into Exchange Online. So what you're going to see is kind of the changes that come with each CU for Exchange 2019 are probably going to be a little smaller than you saw in earlier editions. So with that history lesson out of the way, hybrid. Who did hybrid with Exchange 2010 back when it was like still relatively new? And you lived to tell the tale. So you actually got through that entire workbook of like 100 pages and 1,000,000 steps. You messed one up, you had to start over. It was an absolute, let's be honest, it was a bit of a mess. We were new at it back then. Thanks for sticking with us. Because the way that, you'll often see us say, oh, hybrid it's one click of my little, presentation clicker here. And it's just go, right? It's hybrid. It's easy, right? That's what we want it to be, but we realize that it has not quite been that way. There's been a lot of challenges over time. So we're going to talk a bit of some of the things that we've had challenges with on our side and some of the things that, we hope is useful for you to make things easier as we go forward. One of the big questions that we get, and our team is also the team that does the sizing calculator for Exchange on-premises, is, well, how do we size for hybrid? And honestly, if you're already an established on-premises customer with all of your users there, you've probably already got a healthy amount of infrastructure. And when you start moving everything over, everybody thinks that there's this hybrid server role. Guess what? There's no hybrid server role. That doesn't exist. There's no such thing as the hybrid server. But they think that they have to go out there and put this monstrous amount of infrastructure in place just to support essentially like Autodiscover, FreeBusy, and some mailbox moves into Exchange Online. And really, that's not the case. Like what you have today is essentially what you need for hybrid. Unless we're talking about a very specific reason that you need to go and upgrade to a later version, whether it's because it's going out of support in January 2020, or there's a specific feature you want to use that perhaps requires OAuth, there's almost no reason to go and put a bunch of work into upgrading your on-premises environment first, standing up 20 VMs just for hybrid. What you have should already be adequate if it's already been sized properly for on-premises deployment. Because as you start moving users over, you're now taking off less and less load of the servers that you already have, unless you start decommissioning them as you go. So generally speaking, what we see that people have is what they need. And there's very, very corner case scenarios where it makes sense to go and upgrade them first or add a bunch more servers as you go. I generally tell people, do it last. If you want to upgrade to a newer version of Exchange for something, do that at the end. Move everybody to Exchange Online first so that your infrastructure is now essentially very small and not doing too much, and then take the time to decommission and upgrade the last few remaining servers that might be there for the population of users that you perhaps are not yet going to migrate to Exchange Online. So we'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end. But also, hybrid has really evolved over time. Right? When we first had it, it was that document for Exchange 2010 that you had to walk through manually. Later on, we had the hybrid configuration wizard. Then as we got into 2013, we actually started to make the hybrid configuration wizard a click once runtime object that you launch from a browser, and it would just go and download the latest version, which we'll talk a bit more about that here in a second. But now we've also got these concepts of what we call minimal hybrid, full hybrid. When we get a little later in the presentation, we're going to talk about classic hybrid, modern hybrid. There's all sorts of flavors of hybrid now. So we're trying to make it simpler by making it more complicated, if that makes sense, which it certainly doesn't, but we'll get through it. So minimal hybrid, we've got customers out there that say, look, I love what hybrid can do, but I'm just looking for a quick migration. I'm going to migrate over the course of a couple of weeks, maybe a month or so, and I just want to be able to get mailboxes up to Exchange Online as fast as possible. That's my goal, is to just move everything off, be able to shut down most of our on-premises environment, and start using the cloud. And that's what we call minimal hybrid. It essentially sets up the bare minimum amount of configuration between your on-premises environment and Exchange Online so that you can move a mailbox. All right? You don't care about FreeBusy. You don't care about certificate authenticated mail flow. You just want to move a mailbox. Then minimal hybrid is for you. And what it's going to do behind the scenes, if we build this out, if you go and you look at your Office 365 tenant, if you run through the minimal hybrid wizard, which essentially is just asking you for a set of cloud credentials and local credentials. You don't have to go through the entire wizard and give it a bunch of server names and URLs and a whole bunch of other fancy stuff. It's going to go and set these things up, your accepted domain, your email address policy, your remote domains. DIR-sync enablement, what that actually means is there's a flag on your tenant that says, is this tenant allowed to use directory sync or not? Right? Can this tenant be connected to with Azure AD Connect to do a DIR sync from on-premises? We turn that on for you so that you can go set up AD Connect and do a sync if you'd like to. And it creates the migration endpoint, tests that we can actually reach the migration endpoint. Who here enjoys working with firewalls and their security team, right, to get Exchange published? That's always an interesting discussion, which we'll get into a new way of doing that later. All right? But essentially, once you go through minimal, this is it. You're good to go. You can move your mailboxes and be done with your migration, perhaps over a weekend if it's a small enough environment. And that's what a lot of people are saying they want. They don't want to have a prolonged hybrid experience for months and months and years and years. For the folks that do want to have that environment, and that's perfectly fine. We understand that hybrid is a permanent state for a lot of customers. They don't plan to move everything up to Exchange Online. That's perfectly fine. Full hybrid might be for them, right? And you want to have all those other experiences that come with it. So what doesn't get set up? We mentioned a couple of these already. FreeBusy doesn't get set up cross-premises. So if you've got a user in the cloud trying to look at an on-prem user, they're going to get the little purple hash marks inside of Outlook, the thing that drives all of us crazy when we see those. An OA, an active sync redirection. So if I am a user that you've moved up to Exchange Online and I log into OA in the morning, not realizing you've moved me up, instead of just getting some sort of like page that says user unknown, we do an automatic redirect to point you, hey, you need to go log into Exchange Online now. We'd update an active sync client that's using the active sync protocol. We'd redirect them up to Exchange Online. If you're doing minimal hybrid, these are things you would not get. So it's a little more difficult for the end user, but it gets you the ability to get the mailboxes off on premises faster than you could with full hybrid. So full hybrid. Is there anybody here that's gone through minimal hybrid? 1, 2, 3, you're all sitting together. Same company? Okay. Although I think I saw a couple more. So a few of you gone through it. Everybody else full hybrid? Yeah, all right. We don't want minimal anything, we want all of it. So why are we really doing this? And this might not be news for some of you, but what we're trying to do, is hybrid essentially is how do we blend the different infrastructure? How do we make it look like you're all part of the same organization? Well, this is what full hybrid is going to do for us. It's going to take, instead of users looking like a contact object in Active Directory, depending on which location you're at, we give you the full fidelity contact card. We make it look like a user inside of Outlook. It gets the underlying thing. You can click and get the contact card to chat with them, send them an email, look them up on LinkedIn perhaps, right? Instead of them looking like they belong to another organization. You don't want to be sending your boss a mail and it says, oh, boss is an external user because they're in the cloud and you're still on premises. Like, we just want to make it look like one happy organization. The other big thing is hybrid giving you the ability to use the mailbox replication service to do the mailbox migrations themselves. And like the days of doing IMAP migrations are hopefully going to be behind us soon. But using MRS to do a migration, there's nothing worse than doing a mailbox move and then it triggers something like Outlook has to rebuild its OST file. Right? And now if you've gone and moved a 50 or 70 meg mailbox up into the cloud, you don't want to then have to move that data up and then turn it around and copy it right back down just because the mailbox signature changed or something and Outlook needs to rebuild it. So MRS gets us around that. We don't have to go and pull all the data, essentially doing a data move twice simply because Outlook needs to update its profile. So MRS helps us a lot right there. Hybrid modern auth. Anybody using HMA yet today? One hand? You want to come and talk about it? No? Come on. So hybrid modern auth. We get a lot of requests from customers that say, hey, we want to do things like multi-factor authentication. We want to be able to limit what IP addresses and such are allowed to connect to our environment, but we're not ready to go to Exchange Online, or we're going to be there, but we're going to be hybrid for a long time, and we want our on-premises users to be able to take advantage of some things that they have in the cloud today. But we, Microsoft, have not yet given you the capability to do modern authentication with an entirely on-premises environment. It's something that we just haven't been able to get out the door yet. We've got a lot of client updates that we're still working through to make that a possibility. So we came up with HMA, and essentially, it gives you the capability to use modern authentication for your on-premises environment, but we call it hybrid because it's actually using Azure Active Directory to be able to do that. So your authentication flow is actually going to go through AAD before that user is given a token that they can then turn around and give back to your on-premises environment to log in. All right, so some of the benefits here, if you're subscribing to EMS, right, Enterprise Mobility Suite, you can now use those features for on-premises users, where before you couldn't use them if they were on-prem. But now, because the authentication is going through Azure AD, you get access to that. All right, so you can do all these new conditional access and Intune application protection policies that otherwise were out of reach. So it gives you another capability you might not have had before. If you are a company that has, and we have plenty of folks like this, where your network connectivity is kind of, it's good when it's up, but it's down more often than it's up, this might not be a good solution for you because you need to have rock solid network connectivity to ensure that these auth flows, we're going to go step through what it looks like, you need to make sure that they can happen. And if the network is kind of up, down, up, down, up, down, well, this might not be a good solution for you. Maybe you're doing password hash sync or something like that instead. So what does HMA look like? What's the logical flow? All right, so we've got our user here. They've got no cache tokens. Maybe it's a fresh build that they're logging in with. The Outlook first tries to connect to Exchange. 2013, 16, and 19 all support this. Exchange 2010 does not support this. You can't have any 2010 in your environment, otherwise we won't set this up. Exchange then says, nice to see you, Brian, except I need a token from AAD, and here's the URI that you need to go to get that token. So my client says, thank you very much, Exchange. I'm going to go talk to AAD and say what they want. So it goes up to AAD, provides a username. AAD then says, hi, nice to see you. I also don't want to talk to you yet. How about you go back down to your on-premises environment and talk to ADFS on-premises. So the user doesn't realize all this is happening behind the scenes, thankfully. So the user then goes, oh, I got a password prompt. Okay, I'm going to put in my password or anything else that you require. Once we've done that, ADFS says, thanks, here's my token from on-prem. Go back, hand this back to AAD. AAD says, nice to see you again. What do you have for me? Okay, thank you. I see you've gotten your token from your on-premises ADFS infrastructure. It then can start doing all the conditional access policies and such that you can set up there. And thankfully at this point, it says, okay, you're a good user, I trust you, you've passed all of the conditions that your organization has set up before you're allowed to connect. Here's your access and your refresh tokens. Go back to where you originally came from, we're done here. And then the user in Outlook can go back, hand that token back to Exchange on premises and finally get access to the mailbox that they wanted to open. All right, so it looks a bit more complicated than it used to be, right? Instead of just going direct to the server, providing a username, password, and getting in, but it gets you access to all those other features on the previous slide that you didn't have before. So this is kind of our middle ground of what we could deliver now until we're actually able to get everything updated for the on-premises world to consider deploying modern auth that way. And you guys will get all these slides from the tech community later with all the animations and everything. So feel free to come find me later and I'll show you where that is. So if you want to use hybrid modern auth, just a short list of requirements. Right? So you have to have Office 365 hybrid set up. You have to be doing identity sync, because otherwise, if those identities aren't in Azure AD, well, there's nothing for us to compare to. You need to have OAuth enabled, which means we got to get 2010 out of the environment. And you also need to have not disabled OAuth on the virtual directories for Exchange 2013, 16, and 19. They're on by default, but what we find is some folks have gone and disabled them when they still had 2010 in the environment because they didn't feel that they were ready to use them yet. And then they go through this and they find out it's still broken. What happened? It's, oh, forgot that we turned off OAuth and all the virtual directories before. So remember to check and make sure you haven't turned those off at some point in the future. Need to have an HMA capable client, so a client that is capable of using modern auth. So if you've got Office 365 Pro Plus, you should be good there. You don't want to be using an old version of Outlook. And the final thing is kind of one of the things that I like the most is that regardless of if your user is on premises or if you've moved it up into Exchange Online, they've got the same exact authentication flow. So now when cases come in, you don't have to think about, oh, is it a cloud user? Is it an on-premises user? How are we going to troubleshoot this? So if it's an on-prem user, we go through these steps. If it's a cloud user, we go through these steps. It's one method of authentication for everybody, which personally I think is very nice. So what are some of the challenges that we see out there? So back in, before, I forget the exact CU, but during the 2013 timeframe, we switched over to what we call the web-based release of the hybrid configuration wizard. And what we used to see happen was, we would go and launch a new build of the HCW, and the HCW is built every time that Exchange is built. So it's not a standalone tool that gets created and built on its own. It's actually compiled every time Exchange server is compiled in our data centers. So we'd launch a new version of the HCW. We'd start to see errors compiling in, and we'd be like, oh, what is going on? So our folks, the program managers on our side are looking at all the errors that come in. They go through and say, hey, we've got a giant spike in errors. It's way more than we usually have on a Monday morning. And what's going on? Oh, there's 2 new ones that are, in this case, this was an actual real-world case here we're talking about. 2 new failures made up 33% of all HCW failures worldwide, which was, for us, is a massive spike. Like, there's something wrong here. What happened? So when the HCW runs, we also get a copy of the logs, and we can see what failed. So we could go through, and we could see that the failure was something relatively easy to fix, that there wasn't a lot of complication or risk for us to go and fix. So we would go, and now we can address that, check it in, Exchange very next time Exchange builds, the new HCW gets published, and then the very next time that customer calls and says, hey, I'm checking in, you said that this was a known issue yesterday when we were running the HCW. The next time you call in, the support agent can just say, yep, go ahead, run it again. And the HCW goes, downloads the new copy, because now it's a web-based release. You run the new version, those errors went away. And we saw that we were able to, within, I think, 2 business days, essentially get rid of all the new errors that we had created by releasing essentially a version of the HCW that had a bug in it. So it used to be that we could only publish updates roughly every 3 to 6 months, back when the updates shipped with the Exchange on-premises bits. And now we can essentially fix HCW in a day, or add new functionality in a day if we wanted to. So hopefully, every time you go and you click that, you say, oh, why do I have to download this thing every time and run it? Because we're trying to give you new stuff faster than we could before and fix things faster than we could before. So one of the other big complaints we get is that, and of course this has probably never happened to anybody in the audience because we all know exactly what we're doing, but you go and you spin up a new tenant in Office 365, and essentially what you're getting is this open playground of just default settings, right? So you go and you set things up, and you might run through the HCW, everything comes back successful. All right, we're good to go. We're going to move some mailboxes up there. What do we all tend to do? We move ourselves up there. Seems to work okay. All right, let's move a few other folks. But what customers were finding is that they're kind of getting caught off guard and not realizing that that's another Exchange environment. It's not like, it's sort of an extension of ours, but it's not. So the settings that are on Exchange Online are not necessarily the settings that are in Exchange on premises. So people are wasting a lot of time essentially going and resetting up retention policies or OA mailbox policies and all sorts of stuff that they really hadn't realized that they needed to. So, our thought was, how can we make this easier for everybody? And we came up with what we call the Organization Configuration Transfer Tool, or the OCT for short. And what OCT does now, and it's part of the hybrid configuration wizard, is it's an optional thing that you can run. And when we released version 1, here's what it was capable of doing. And all it is doing is looking at your on-premises environment and saying, hey, here's a bunch of objects that we know people tend to also set up in Exchange Online. Would you like us to copy those settings and push them up to Exchange Online for you? Save you a bunch of time, right? Then you don't have to go write a bunch of scripts to do it. And you can just say, yeah, that sounds great. Click that, copy those over. So in version 1, we could do retention policies, retention policy tags, OM mailbox policies, everything there. But the key part is the very last line there that says new star actions only, which means that, oh, it was only the new whatever commandlet that we could run. And that was it. It was a one-time copy. So we're like, here you go. There's your copy. Now you need to go manage it after the fact. So if you made a change on-prem, you then had to go and change it in the cloud. So it was like, great, we saved you some time, but you still had to come back and manage these over the period of time if you had changes. So we knew we could do better. So we said, we're going to go and release organization configuration transfer v2. And we're certainly taking feedback if you'd like to see a v3. And we've done a few interesting things here. All of the items in bold at the bottom are new items that we added to it. So these are additional things that it will copy up now. But the real benefit of version 2 is that we've actually gone and added all the set commandlets. So now it doesn't just go and create those items for once. You can actually rerun this tool if you want to, as many times as you'd like, if you had changes on premises. And it will also now go and update those objects as well. So if you've made a bunch of changes on-prem and you just want to quickly go and get those changes into Exchange Online, run through the HCW, click the option to run the organization configuration tool, which if I back up here, you see it's an optional checkbox at the bottom of the wizard. And it will go through and it will update the objects that it might have put there before, but now you've had changes. All right, has anybody used the OCT? A few of you, okay. Is anybody looking at that saying, I had no idea that was in the tool now because I haven't run the HCW in months? That's okay, that's why we're here to tell you. Okay, connectivity discussion. Who here loves telling, well, first of all, is anybody from their company's security team in the room? Or are we all friends? Okay, they didn't put their hands up, so it's security through obscurity, if anything. Right, so the most fun discussions we get at Microsoft, Exchange admin calls us and says, we really want to go hybrid, we want to publish this thing, but the security team says there's no way they're doing it. They're not going to let traffic in on 443 from the internet to our internal network. Because we don't have a way of, there's no device that Microsoft makes to put into a perimeter network / DMZ that kind of stands in between Exchange Online and your Exchange on-premises infrastructure. We're just expecting that traffic to be able to go flow freely from Exchange Online right to your servers on your internal networks. So this gets to be a very interesting discussion. There's been lots of ways customers have tried to limit, well, I'll say to mitigate what they consider their risk. But we've come up with something new. And go forward here a little bit. This is how easy we want it to be, right? One click and done. We've come up with something new called the hybrid agent. Anybody read the hybrid agent articles we had on the ELO blog yet? So the really nice thing about working at Microsoft is, while I'm focusing on Exchange, there's 100 and something thousand other people making other really cool things out there. And what we found is that we could reuse some technology from our friends over in Azure that was called the Azure Application Proxy. So what we did was we partnered with them, and now we've created this thing we call the hybrid agent. And if we just kind of walk through the graphic here. Right, in the past, we would expect that Exchange Online essentially can talk right through your firewall and get to your Exchange on-premises servers. And that's the point of contention that we often run into with security folks. So, okay, well, how about this option? We will come up with something that essentially is a little agent that runs an Exchange. And that agent on Exchange will then make an outbound connection through your firewall, connect to something that we call a hybrid proxy service up in Azure, and then that will be the point at which Exchange Online will connect to and then funnel the traffic back down to your on-premises environment. They said, oh, That's an interesting concept. So what you're telling me now is that I don't actually have to open up any inbound ports from Exchange Online to Exchange On-Prem to get hybrid. That's essentially correct. We've now created a method that it's all outbound connections to perform some of the hybrid functionality. Now, version 1, which we've got in preview now, it only supports FreeBusy and mailbox moves. So it doesn't do OAuth, it doesn't do a bunch of other stuff that we'll talk about in a second. So keep in mind when we're talking about this, it's still early technology, we're still testing it, but this is the concept that we're coming up with. So a little more detail here, how are we doing this? Well, when the agent is installed and set up, essentially you get this randomized GUID from Azure that you then can go and tell in your Exchange Online configuration, something we call a target sharing EPR that says, hey, you know what? For anything auto-discover related, use this URL. And Exchange Online will look at that, and anytime it needs to go into a FreeBusy lookup for somebody that's on premises, we'll say, oh, target sharing EPR has been defined as this URL, and as you can see here, it's going to be the same form for everybody that uses the hybrid agent. A GUID resource, FreeBusy, HIS, msproxy.net. And that is telling Exchange Online, go talk to the hybrid proxy service that sits in Azure, and then it will take care of routing that traffic back to Exchange on-premises via the agent that is sitting on the Exchange on-premises server. It doesn't actually traverse your firewall through an inbound port. Similarly, for migration, you create a new migration endpoint, and the migration endpoint, well, if we just go back once, right, take a look at the highlighted part here, but if we go back one slide, see we've got resource.mailbox migration. The only thing really different was we had resource.freebusy. So as we extend the hybrid agent to being able to do more things, we'll start to see some more of these URLs light up as we go. So now what you've told Exchange Online is, hey, you know what? Here's my migration endpoint. So anytime that you want to reach into our on-premises environment to get a mailbox to move up into Exchange Online, come to this URL. And it's the same thing. That URL is going to resolve to the hybrid proxy agent sitting in Azure, which then is able to talk to the hybrid agent that's sitting on the Exchange server itself. And the Exchange server agent is the one that's initiating that conversation and connect to the MRS service in Exchange on-premises and pull the mailbox up to Exchange Online. So you no longer have the MRS agent itself coming in through your firewall connecting to the on-premises servers. It actually will come in through the hybrid proxy agent, exit out the agent itself, and then contact MRS on the box directly. So how does this work? How do we set this up? So here are the steps, and then we'll kind of just go through the GUI so you can see what it looks like. And it's relatively boring because it does all the work for you, to be honest. So step one, it downloads the agent itself. So it's an option in the hybrid configuration wizard. You'll see it called Modern. So if you click Modern, this is what it's going to set up. Now be careful, right? Because even though it says Modern, it doesn't yet support all of the scenarios that the classic version supports right now. So just keep in mind, go back, read our documentation before you make any decisions. So it's going to, behind the scenes, download the MSI, install the MSI. This is also the step when it will create the unique tenant identifier, that big GUID that's in the beginning of the URL. And it's also going to create a certificate that is installed on the Exchange server as part of the hybrid agent. And thankfully, that's a certificate that you do not need to manage. It's a self-rolling certificate. I believe it has a lifespan of 180 days, but we roll the certificate about a month before the certificate expires so that the agent can continue working. And the agent also auto-updates itself. So you don't have to go back and manage this agent later on. It will actually check for updates on its own and install them. Configure agent is itself configuring itself. And then the last thing it does is very similar to the other steps that the HCW does, which is it will then try to contact the MRS endpoint, just as a final check. So if it gets through all of this and then it finds out I still can't contact MRS for some reason, there's some other problem that needs to be fixed in the environment. And that's just our final check to make sure everything is good before it starts getting utilized. So what does this look like? So we would go through the HCW like normal. We would provide our credentials. We would pick full hybrid. And then the next option is, this might be a little small to see, but you'll get it in the deck. Do you want to use Exchange Modern Hybrid or use Exchange Classic Hybrid, right? And this is where you would make that decision. If you use Classic Hybrid, it's the one that we've all been doing since Exchange 2010. If you choose Modern Hybrid, it's the one that uses the Azure App Proxy service and installs the hybrid agent itself. So we'd select the Modern. It would download the agent, install the agent. It would register the unique identifier and such, get the certificate for the agent itself, and then validate that it can actually contact MRS on the box through the agent. All right? Nothing you actually have to provide there. It just gets all of the configuration information from your on-premises environment and then sets it up for you. So as you mentioned, version 1. All right, we're still doing this in preview. What are some of the things that it does and does not support? It supports free, busy, and mailbox moves. That's it right now. Those were the big ticket items that a lot of the more security conscious or conservative customers asked us that they wanted. They did not like that traffic coming directly from Exchange Online into their internal networks. Right now, it's only for new hybrid setups. So if you went home and said, hey, this sounds interesting, I'd like to try this in my lab that's already set up for hybrid, it won't even let you set it up. Right? It's only for new environments. So you'd actually have to go and set up a new test lab if you wanted to play with it and kind of get a feel for it. So we're looking at how we can change this in version 1.5 or 2 or such later, where you can actually switch over to the new method if you would like to. It does not support OAuth. So if you need any functionality that requires the OAuth trust between on-prem and Exchange Online, that will not work. It also does not support hybrid modern auth. So as you can see, there's a lot of knots in there right now. This is why it's still a technology that's in preview. But as we go through, we'll start to unlock some of these scenarios and get a better idea of what we can deliver through this tool. We also don't support multi-forest deployments right now. So if you've got an Exchange on-premises environment that is made up of multiple Exchange orgs and multiple forests, all going back to a single tenant, the hybrid agent cannot yet support those scenarios. So some of the more complex scenarios it cannot yet support. It also does not change anything for SMTP. Right? So mail does not go through it. So you still need to allow mail to traverse between the premises or have an edge server out in the perimeter network if you'd like to. It also does not change any of the outbound flow. So if we go back here to some of the earlier slides, quite a ways back, anything that is going from Exchange server to Exchange Online is still going to go over the internet. So it's a one-way tunnel. It's only for, even though we are initiating the connection outbound from the hybrid agent, it is only for free, busy, and mailbox migrations where Exchange Online needs to reach in to get information. Anything that on premises is initiating itself, looking up free, busy to Exchange Online, for example, that's still going to traverse the normal communication path that it does today. So where are we coming from? If you've got Exchange 2013, 16, or 19, things are, well, I don't want to call them, it's simple like it says there, but it's more simple, a little easier. You can use OAuth right away, and with OAuth in place, you can do things like cross-premises e-discovery and a bunch of other cool stuff. Hybrid modern auth could be used if you've got those, right? What's the key thing here? If you have Exchange 2010, well, that's kind of the linchpin where you need to get 2010 out of the environment to light up some of these scenarios. If you want to be able to use HMA, if you want to be able to use some other stuff that's coming, 2010 can't exist. So for the folks that still have 2010 out there, you've got a few months left that you can get those resources off either onto a newer version of Exchange on premises or get them all up into the cloud. And as I mentioned earlier, what do we tell customers to do? My suggestion is if you are going to stay on-prem, you've got 2010, move as much as you can up into Exchange Online now so that the remaining users you have left, you have to do a much smaller upgrade. It's no fun to go and upgrade 300 servers on premises and then move 295 servers worth of users up to Exchange Online. That's a bunch of kind of work that you didn't need to do. Unless you bill hourly and you go for it. But I prefer to see customers work with a smaller migration after the fact if possible. Let's see, coming to the end here, and then we'll have some time for Q&A, it looks like. Has everybody here worked with Fast Track before? Okay, so the ones that have, or the ones that don't know about Fast Track, they're also down in the hub this week. So if you're kind of like stuck, you say, I don't quite know where I need to go, I haven't found a consultant to help us get to Exchange Online or to get rid of Exchange 2010, This is a resource that's out there at Microsoft that can kind of work with you, and they've got certain offerings that they have in place that they can say, hey, we can either help you do the migration or help you plan the migration or put you in touch with some partners that we trust to do the migration. And they'd be more than happy to talk to you guys down in the booth. But with that, that's kind of the end of the things that we're working on right now for hybrid to hopefully make some things easier. Thank you for your time, and we've got a nice solid 20 minutes for Q&A, so if there's anything on hybrid you want to talk about, I'll hang around and answer those. I'll also try to repeat the question just so folks can hear it in the room if there's questions over here and everybody's down there listening. And then again, I'll be downstairs from 2 to 3:30 in the hub later today, so if you want to talk about Exchange on-prem, if you want to talk about multi-geo, if you want to talk about mergers and acquisitions, anything along those lines, I'd be happy to take those questions. So thank you for your time, and if anybody's got questions, raise the hands and we'll try to get through some. Sir, front row. Recipient management. So let me take a guess. When can I get rid of the final Exchange server? I would love to have an answer for you on that one. So one of the interesting things right now is that we want to get rid of that last box as well. The challenge is that right now, anytime you're doing directory sync, essentially all of the attributes for those objects are their source of authority is on-premises, your on-premises Active Directory. And right now, they all get locked from being modified in your tenant itself. So we're trying to figure out what's our management story going to be if we get rid of that last Exchange server on-premises? What tools can we use to still manage those users? We're going through a few ideas right now. One of the interesting concepts, and this is not something I'm saying we're delivering, but one of the things that we're looking at is now, especially with this hybrid agent, it gives us another interesting option we didn't have before, which is now we also have a path to perhaps make LDAP calls from Exchange Online to your on-premises Active Directory. So theoretically, you could think of a concept where you now can use a management tool in Exchange Online to modify an object, but what it's actually doing is making a call through the hybrid agent, exiting as like an LDAP call on-prem, making the change to the domain controller, and then Azure AD Connect syncs it back up. So those are some of the concepts we're looking at right now to see if they're feasible or not, because we would love to say, hey, yeah, you moved everybody over, you can go ahead and get rid of that last Exchange server. I completely agree with you. It looks silly to have a virtual machine sitting there just for management tools. So we're trying very hard to work towards that goal. It has turned out to be much more difficult than we thought it would be. So even though we haven't given you a solution yet, we're trying to get there. Anybody else? No? Oh, sir. As of today, if you have no Exchange server on premises and you're using directory sync to Office 365, you're in an unsupported state. So any Exchange-related attributes need to be modified through an approved management tool, whether it be Exchange PowerShell, Exchange Admin Center, etc. If there's some third-party tool that's using direct LDAP calls, ADSI edit, LDP, you name it, those are all considered unsupported right now. Now I'm afraid to walk back. It's a mail routing question. So you want to use our message encryption feature, but you don't want the mail to route through Exchange Online, you want it to go, say, on premises right to the internet? Yeah, I don't think there's a way to do that, but that might be a good one to come find me in the booth later and we can draw it out a little more detailed and figure out if there's a way to do it. But. Anybody? No, I've put you all to sleep at this point? Oh, what? Now, just wait until I get by the speaker? Go ahead. Oh, come on. What? Is Exchange 2019 the last version of Exchange on-prem question? We don't know yet. We just released it. So, the way we've looked at it so far is that we've got a very healthy on-premises customer base right now. And in the past, we've said as long as that lives, we're going to be there for them. I don't know what that'll turn into in the future. So it's way too early for us to say if there's going to be another version or what's going to happen. But we just released 2019. You've got at least 7 years of support there before there's another version that would have to happen anyways. So no news yet, but thanks for asking. I was waiting for that one. There was somebody else near you, also it's the same question. Yes? Shared mailboxes between like permissions and such. Still a challenge. Something the same team that was doing like the hybrid agent stuff is also working on cross-premises permissions, migrating permissions. It's a gnarly scenario that we're trying to get fixed, but it's something we would like to get fixed for sure. Because it becomes a big problem when you say, hey, I want to migrate these 15 users. Oh, well, they also use these shared mailboxes, and this person's a delegate for this person, who then is a delegate for this person. And you end up essentially with this list of like, well, I need to move everybody in one night? Like, that's tough. We've got a team of folks that are actually dedicated right now to trying to figure out how do we make sense of that? And do we need to do a better way of telling you, hey, you put Brian in a mailbox batch to migrate, and here's the other 15 related objects. Like, can we automate that and like just give you a list and say, hey, this is a good group to move them together? Do we put our resources towards that, or do we put our resources towards fixing permissions so they work cross-premises? We're still kind of battling out what's the more appropriate thing to do. Yes. Over there? It was a question around mail routing and whether or not they could use encryption if mail was going out from encryption like what do we call it, OME, whether they could use that if mail was going direct from on-prem to the internet, not coming back through Exchange Online. So we'll have to sketch that one out. Yes? Yep. Yeah, so you're probably, what's happening is probably an attachment's coming in. We essentially, I hate using this word, but detonate it inside a virtual machine to see is it a good attachment, a bad attachment. And that can take a little while because we have to spin up a VM essentially behind the scenes, drop that attachment in it, observe it, and then kind of say, this looks good, and then let the message keep going. So while it's a really cool feature that protects a lot of folks, it does potentially add a little latency to the end-to-end mail traffic because it kind of has to pause in the middle there, get processed, and then make a determination of if it should go forward or not. Anybody else? Yes? Oh, so like remote desktop services, VDI. What was the last part? Sorry, without what? Without FS. Wait, do you work for them? Is this an ad? Do you have a booth downstairs? It's a challenging space right now, so doing any kind of VDI-like solution with Outlook and you want to use cache mode, it's very difficult. It's a challenge that we've been trying to solve for the entire time I've been at Microsoft for the last decade. And unless you've got storage that essentially follows the user around and reattaches wherever they connect, it gets very difficult. And at that point, and we've got some customers that I've worked with, the global customers that are using VDI, they're using online mode, and there's some challenges that come with that. Very often we'll suggest, have you looked at OA? Is OA good enough these days? Because it has come pretty far. And then usually they say something like, well, it would work, but we've got this add-in from 1994 that we still use, and the consultant passed away and we don't have the code, so we're sticking with Outlook 2007. But we haven't solved it yet. There's no easy answer for that one. If the storage follows the user around, so they're not constantly creating a new OST file, that's great. Keep the sync slider down to 3 days, something small, so that if it does rebuild, it's really quick.
because there's no way you want to rebuild a 50 gig OST every time they hit a new RDS box. So haven't quite solved it yet. There's no magic answer, unfortunately, on that one. Anybody else? We're just taking a nap. Sufficiently bored you to death. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time. I'll be downstairs at 2.